unaccompanied children who seek refuge in the United States. We held the first hearing in June in response to a disturbing New York Times investigation exposing the exploitation of these children. At that hearing, we heard from child welfare and labor experts. Today, we'll hear directly from the executive branch officials about what steps the federal government is taking to confront this problem. I know there is bipartisan interest in this issue. Several Republican members asked me to hold today's hearing, which I was happy to do. I told them I'm happy to accommodate the request because I was already working to schedule it. It's a major challenge for our nation, and we need to face it honestly. In fact, there is a long history of both parties working together to protect these children. In 2008, the Senate unanimously passed the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, known as TVPRA. This legislation's protections for unaccompanied children were championed by our late colleague, Senator Feinstein. The bill was signed into law by Republican President George W. Bush. As a result, our laws now require that unaccompanied children arriving in the United States be screened for human trafficking, housed in child-appropriate settings, and reunited with family in the U.S. while they await their immigration proceedings outcome. These laws enshrine our nation's moral and legal responsibility to protect children, vulnerable children, many of whom are fleeing persecution. But the tragic reality is these children are still at risk once they arrive here. Since 2018, our nation has seen a nearly 70% increase in underage children working in positions in violation of child labor laws. And several states have responded to our labor shortage, amazingly, by passing laws and making it easier for children to work in many dangerous jobs. It's hard to imagine, but that is a fact. Now, when I was in college, I spent 4 summers working in a meatpacking plant in East St. Louis, Illinois. I can tell you it's no place for a kid. You can lose a limb or a life. The accounts of children as young as 12 years of age working in slaughterhouses and factories make us think of the 1830s and 1930s and not the modern times. I hope today's hearing will be an opportunity to continue the bipartisan spirit that led to current laws protecting unaccompanied children, who often have risked their lives to make a trek to this country. I want to remind everyone these unaccompanied children are just that, children. And I'd like to share the story of one of them, a teenager named Eric. He came to the United States as an unaccompanied child, took a job to help his family back home. His employer stopped paying him. He took Eric's birth certificate and immigration documents. He threatened to call immigration if Eric stopped working, and even worse, he threatened to harm Eric's family in his home country. Fortunately, Eric had the support of an adult who stepped in, a trusted post-release services social worker funded by the Department of Human Services. His social worker connected him to federal law enforcement as well as medical and legal services. I hope we all agree, no child should ever be abused, exploited, or trafficked. That's why I've tried to be consistent in my oversight efforts, whether the president is a Republican or Democrat. I vigorously opposed and still do the Trump administration's family separation policy. Earlier this year, I demanded that the Biden administration do more to protect migrant children. They've made progress since then, but certainly much more has to be done. We cannot forget the responsibility of the United States Congress. It is easy to criticize the executive branch, but first we should look in the mirror. It has been decades, 3 in fact, 3 decades since Congress passed meaningful immigrant legislation. Instead of lobbying partisan attacks, let's come together across the aisle to fix our broken immigration system, secure our border, and protect these children. I reject the extreme that says not one more immigrant, and I've heard my colleagues in Congress say that, not one more immigrant. And I also reject the extreme that says we're doing just fine. The status quo is acceptable. We've got to find middle ground here that is reasonable, thoughtful, and reflects American values in a world which is teeming with refugees and people who are desperate to find new places to live. Imagine what's going on in the Middle East. We're going to feel it soon on the southern border if we haven't already. We should provide adequate funding to increase enforcement against child labor violations once children are here, and ensure these children have access to the services they need. We also need new safeguards that strengthen the promise of TVPRA. This week, I'm introducing legislation to improve sponsor vetting, placement, help children navigate the legal system, and better protect minors in government custody. I welcome my colleagues from either side of the aisle to join me in that effort. And with that, I hand things off to the ranking member, Senator Graham, for his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You do have a history of trying to find common ground to fix hard problems associated with immigration. I've been working in that regard for a long time, many times with you. I have never seen anything like this. Since 2020, the number of unaccompanied minors has gone up by 312%. I think you'll find sympathy on our side to make sure people are well taken care of, but you'll also find on our side a desire for the safety and well-being of the American people. This is entitled Ensuring the Safety and Well-Being of Unaccompanied Children. What about the safety and well-being of the American people from illegal immigration? CNN, not Fox, smugglers associated with ISIS are getting people into the country. October the 21st, Border Patrol stops record number of people on terror watch list at southern border. October the 23rd, CBP memo sounds alarm on Hamas-Hezbollah fighters potentially using southern border to enter U.S. I am a strong supporter of aid to Ukraine. It is a fight that matters to us. The Ukrainians are fighting like tigers. I'm all for giving them more lethal aid and assistance so they can repel the Russian invader. I'm all for helping our friends in Israel who are in the fight for their very existence. But we got to do something to help the American people. And the American people have an unsecured border. The American people are being overrun with illegal immigration. The unaccompanied children have increased since 2020 by 312%. Whatever the Biden administration is doing is not working. As to the supplemental, there will have to be policy changes to get my support. I will not go back to South Carolina and say, we helped Israel, we helped Ukraine, but we did nothing meaningful on our own border. Our asylum system is being gamed, the parole system is being abused, and after coming back from Israel, I can tell you what these Hamas fighters are capable of, but I can't say it here because it's so terrible. Their desire to kill the Jews is unlimited, and they would kill us too if they could get here. So, Mr. Chairman, now is the time to find a solution to the asylum parole problem so we can have some breathing space to find a way to better protect America. I cannot in good conscience tell you that money will fix this. The proposal by President Biden to secure our border has more to do with processing illegal immigrants than it does to turn them around. My goal is to come up with policies that will stop the flood of illegal immigration, which a terrorist could easily weave themselves into, not expedite their entry, not more money for blue states who are housing these people to take some burden off them. Every American should want their border secured. I'm sure every American wants to take care of children when we find them. You just can't have every child throughout the world dropped on our doorstep. This is a process that needs to change. It's bad for the children, but I can't stress to you enough, the broken border that's existed under the Biden administration, along with the rise of radical Islam in Afghanistan, now Hamas, is a cocktail for the American people to be viciously attacked. I have run out of patience. It is now time to change policy as part of a package to help our allies. It would be ironic to me that we helped Israel and Ukraine and did nothing on our own border that would change the trajectory of illegal immigration. Everything in the Biden proposal doesn't make anybody want to turn around. That's what I'm seeking, is to have people turn around.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Today we welcome 4 witnesses. The first is Joseph Salazar, Director for Central America Bureau of Western Hemisphere's Affairs at the Department of State. Thank you. We're also joined by Robin Dunn Marcos, Director of the Office of Refugee Resettlement at the Department of Health and Human Services. Then we'll hear from Seema Nanda, the Solicitor of Labor at the Department of Labor, who I understand is from the great city of Chicago. Welcome. Our final witness is Cardell Morant, the Assistant Director for Homeland Security Investigations, and Director of the Department of Homeland Security Center for Countering Human Trafficking. Let me lay out the mechanics. After I swear in the witnesses, each has 5 minutes. Then we'll have rounds of questioning where each senator will have 5 minutes. Please try to stay within your allotted time. So I'd ask the witnesses to please stand and be sworn in. If you raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that all 4 witnesses have answered in the affirmative, and Mr. Salazar, you'll be the first.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Graham, for holding this important hearing. I'm honored to join my colleagues here who are the true experts in the fight against trafficking and what happens once Central Americans make the difficult choice to leave their countries. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you more about the complex conditions that drive people to migrate from Northern Central America, as well as important progress on our efforts to address them. Northern Central America faces serious several challenges. Democratic backsliding in the region affects people's trust in institutions and perception of how freely they can exercise their rights. Victims of corruption are more likely to express intentions to migrate. High youth unemployment rates, numerous barriers such as inadequate access to education, and vast economic equality spur migration. Coupled with high levels of informality, low wages that do not cover basic needs, a vicious cycle of reliance on debt to meet those basic needs, and the lack of decent jobs in all 3 countries all contribute to the migratory wave. Despite decreased homicide rates, other types of crime and violence, including rampant gender-based violence, cause insecurity in the region. Many individuals and families see migration as the only choice to escape poverty, instability, narcotics violence, and climate-related catastrophes. In 2021, the Biden-Harris administration launched the strategy to address the root causes of irregular migration from Central America. The root causes strategy focuses on creating good jobs, promoting democratic governance, protecting human rights, improving security, and countering gender-based violence to help Central Americans build better futures at home. The strategy addresses the factors that drive irregular migration and forced displacement from Northern Central America, including food insecurity, chronic structural challenges, extreme poverty, citizen insecurity, poor governance, and endemic corruption. First and foremost, we need strong governance in the region. Without it, we cannot achieve sustainable, equitable progress across all strategic areas, including economic prosperity and security. We partner with civil society, the private sector, labor unions, regional governments, and international actors to advance U.S. policy goals. In the last year, the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development supported more than 1,500 human rights defenders and trained more than 500 independent journalists. This support provides quick help to embattled human rights defenders and civil society organizations through emergency assistance, supporting human rights actors and media practitioners to remain resilient, mitigate risks, overcome threats, and continue their important work as safely as possible. Through the Voices Initiative, we bring together U.S. resources, public and private diplomacy, foreign assistance programming, and enforcement authorities to protect, defend, and promote civic space in Central America. We are also taking actions to promote accountability for corrupt and undemocratic actors, as well as human rights abusers. On July 19th, the U.S. government issued our most recent public list consistent with Section 353 of the United States Northern Triangle Enhanced Engagement Act of individuals who knowingly engaged in acts that undermine democratic processes or institutions, engaged in significant corruption, or obstructed investigations into such acts of corruption in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. This critical tool promotes accountability, and we appreciate bipartisan support for it. On economic growth, Vice President Harris leads Central America Forward, an innovative public-private partnership to create good jobs in the region. Under Central America Forward, companies have committed to invest over $4.2 billion in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. These investments have created thousands of good jobs, connected 4 million people to the internet, brought more than 1 million people into the formal financial economy, and trained almost 500,000 people to enhance their workforce abilities, including digital and language skills. This is key to ending irregular migration. But this is not just about investment. Our private sector engagement reinforces the rule of law, good governance, and human rights. We certainly are not naive about the challenges we face. It will take time to address many of these long-term structural issues. My team works ardently on these issues, and we are grateful for continued bipartisan support to ultimately help the people in the region maintain their futures in their home countries. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before this committee today. I look forward to working with Congress to strengthen our approach.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. Ms. Marcos?
Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services, along with my esteemed colleagues. Since assuming my position as Director of Office of Refugee Resettlement in September 22, I have led a dedicated team of professionals who are committed to ensuring the safety and well-being of every child in our care. This is not only our mandate, it is our guiding principle. Under the Homeland Security Act and the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, ORR is required to provide for the care and custody of all unaccompanied children following a referral from the Department of Homeland Security or other federal entity until they're released to a vetted sponsor. The Flores Settlement Agreement also establishes minimum service standards for ORR-funded programs. ORR funds nearly 300 programs in 27 states, providing a range of child-focused services. However, given the program's child welfare mission, we know the best place for a child is with a family in a community, not in a congregate care setting. Pursuant to the TVPRA, ORR conducts due diligence to identify a sponsor's ability to provide for a child's physical and mental well-being prior to placing the child in their care. ORR works in the best interest of the child to safely expedite their release to a parent, family member, or other appropriate sponsor. In the past 2 fiscal years, more than 85% of unaccompanied children released to sponsors were placed with a close family member. We have thorough sponsor screening processes in place for all sponsors. This includes verifying the sponsor's relationship to the child, speaking with the child's parents, conducting separate interviews with the child and the sponsor, verifying sponsor information and documentation, and administering background checks and address checks. ORR also conducts home studies as required or at ORR's discretion to further review a sponsor's ability to care for the child's safety and well-being. All releases following home studies require post-release services. While ORR's custodial responsibilities end when a child is discharged, our concern for that child does not. ORR has policies in place to promote children's well-being as they transition into a new community, providing children with multiple ways to connect following their sponsor placement, such as through the safety and well-being calls, post-release services, legal services, or the 24/7 ORR National Call Center, which connects children and sponsors with community resources and is required to report all safety concerns to ORR and other federal, state, and/or local entities. Notably, the authority to remove a child from a home resides with state child welfare and law enforcement agencies. We recognize the critical importance of our coordination and engagement with these agencies, their varied capabilities, and the need for robust resources to help ensure their ability to review or investigate allegations. ORR is continually assessing and implementing improvements to the UC program. We continue to partner with DOL in ongoing efforts to protect children against labor exploitation, such as through new materials for children about U.S. child labor laws, educator roundtable sessions on unlawful child labor. We are actively engaged with DOL to ensure we're finding and addressing the needs of children who may face exploitation. ORR has also established a new program accountability team responsible for assessing and addressing potential exploitation risks faced by unaccompanied children. In addition, we are offering post-release services to all children with known vulnerabilities and to children released to unrelated sponsors. In fiscal year 2022, ORR more than doubled the rate of children offered these services than the prior year, to more than 40%. We continue to expand access to post-release services this year, in fiscal year '23, providing access to more than 50% of discharged children. ORR is committed, with funding support from Congress, to continue to expand access to both PRS and legal services to all children. In fact, the proposed UC program foundational rule published earlier this month would establish a comprehensive framework for placement and care and formalize and expand services for unaccompanied children. However, without supplemental appropriations in fiscal year '24, there could be a significant impact on ORR's ability to timely accept referrals or, beyond what is minimally required, expand access to services that promote children's safety. We would also welcome more resources from Congress for ORR to expand not just access to, but the nature of services available to children post-release. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. Children who come into ORR care face unique challenges that require a whole-of-government approach. ORR is committed to caring for these children and doing all we can to safeguard their well-being. I'm happy to address questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Marcos. Ms. Nanda?
Good morning, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The Department of Labor is responsible for enforcing the nation's fundamental federal worker protection laws, including child labor laws. 85 years ago, Congress passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, which included child labor provisions. Congress intended to protect children in our industrialized economy by ensuring that when young people work, the work is safe, age-appropriate, and does not jeopardize their health, well-being, or education. The importance and relevance of these foundational principles remain. In fiscal year 2023, the department saw an 88% increase since FY 2019 in the number of children it has found employed illegally. As the challenge of child labor exploitation, including of migrant children, increases nationwide, the Department of Labor has taken significant actions to investigate child labor violations and hold companies accountable. The Department's Wage and Hour Division and the Office of Solicitor are working collaboratively to leverage all available enforcement tools to protect children from exploitive labor. The Wage and Hour Division investigates every child labor complaint, tip, and referral, and it ensures compliance with child labor protections in all of its FLSA investigations. In FY 2023 alone, the department found 955 companies that it investigated had employed nearly 5,800 children in violation of child labor laws, including over 500 children employed in hazardous jobs. And the department assessed more than $8 million in civil monetary penalties against employers who unlawfully employed children. Today, the department has more than 800 open child labor cases nationwide. The Solicitor's Office attorneys are responsible for obtaining warrants, supporting and defending the Wage and Hour Division's civil monetary penalty assessments, filing temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions, crafting settlement agreements that hold employers accountable, and more. When cases cannot be resolved at the investigative stage, the Solicitor's Office is the agency responsible for litigating those cases. In recent years, the Solicitor's Office has brought landmark cases to ensure compliance with child labor laws. In September 2022, for example, the department obtained a federal court order to stop SL Alabama LLC, a manufacturer of Hyundai and Kia auto parts, from illegally employing 13, 14, and 15-year-old workers. Soon after, in November 2022, the department secured a nationwide temporary restraining order against Packer Sanitation Services, Inc., Ltd., PSSI, one of the nation's leading providers of food safety sanitation, to stop the company from illegally employing minor-aged workers. By February 2023, the department had assessed $1.5 million in civil monetary penalties in this case after finding more than 100 children illegally employed in hazardous occupations and working overnight shifts at meat processing facilities. Just this month, the department filed a hot goods action and obtained a temporary restraining order to stop the exploitation of child labor by a poultry processor in California. The department also recognizes the need for a whole-of-government approach. Just 10 days after PSSI was assessed and paid $1.5 million in CMPs, the department announced a significant new effort to combat exploitive child labor. This included the initiation of a national strategic enforcement initiative on child labor and the launch of an interagency task force to combat child labor exploitation, led by the Department of Labor. As a part of these efforts, the Department of Labor and the Department of Health and Human Services signed a memorandum of understanding in March 2023. It formalized an ongoing partnership and outlined procedures to work together to deepen information sharing, coordination, cross-training of staff, and public education efforts. No modern nation should build its economy on the backs of exploited children. The Department of Labor is calling on Congress to ensure that the department has the resources needed for this work, this enforcement work, and to increase civil monetary penalties for companies that use child labor. We must all work together to make sure that children are safe, healthy, and protected from exploitation. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions today.
Thank you, Ms. Nanda. Mr. Moran?
Good morning, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding the role of Homeland Security investigations to investigate federal crimes relating to the exploitation of unaccompanied non-citizen children after their arrival in the United States, where HSI has determined that human trafficking has occurred. I serve as the director of the DHS Center for Countering Human Trafficking, located within HSI, building capacity across DHS and supporting HSI criminal investigations of human trafficking worldwide. This month marks my 30-year anniversary as a career federal law enforcement officer. Throughout my years of experience in various roles, I've witnessed the darker aspects of human behavior. Among the countless cases I've been involved with, the ones that are continuously bothersome are those that concern children. This is a shared sentiment among HSI personnel and one that continually renews our commitment to identifying and assisting child victims, using a victim-centered approach and bringing the perpetrators of these crimes to justice. Human traffickers victimize a staggering 27.6 million people worldwide, and contrary to public perception, there are an estimated 77% of victims in forced labor and 23% in sex trafficking. That means more than 3/4 of human trafficking is in workplaces. HSI investigations show that traffickers operate within agriculture, manufacturing, in private homes as nannies or domestic workers, typically in jobs with lower pay and fewer legal protections. Over the last 3 fiscal years, HSI has initiated numerous investigations into human trafficking, some of which involved unaccompanied children as potential victims. Overall, HSI doesn't view the number of cases that involved unaccompanied children as a surge or a pattern, but rather a consistent, ongoing crime that we investigate with unwavering dedication. These investigations are occurring throughout the United States, primarily in the agriculture industry. Today, I speak about the way we work these cases. In general, HSI proactively investigates and receives reports from a variety of sources. We conduct extensive outreach within local communities and work closely with law enforcement partners. That includes the offices of the Inspector General at the Departments of Labor and Health and Human Services. When HSI is investigating employer hiring practices, we're also looking for signs of trafficking, which we'll then investigate further, or signs of labor exploitation and child labor, which we'd refer to the Department of Labor. HSI also initiates human trafficking investigations when an agency of first contact encounters unaccompanied non-citizen children, identifies them as trafficking victims, and subsequently refers the case to HSI. When either the U.S. Customs and Border Protection or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services identifies an unaccompanied child as a potential trafficking victim, they contact the nearest HSI office. If HSI has jurisdiction, we'll investigate. HSI is committed to using every authority and resource available to make federal criminal arrest of human traffickers and child predators, and to identify and assist the victims. Anyone can report suspicions of human trafficking to the HSI tip line. We're always available to our federal interagency partners here today, other federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement, and victim service providers and NGOs for reports, referrals, and tips of human trafficking, child sexual exploitation, and unlawful employer hiring practices. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morant. Now we'll have a round of 5 minutes questions from the senators, and I'll start. The first person who introduced me to the world of politics taught me something. He said, humility is the first casualty in politics. So I have followed that standard when it comes to bragging as often as possible about the fact that my mother was an immigrant to this country, and I'm damn proud of it. Her naturalization certificate sits behind my desk in the Capitol building as a reminder of who I am and where I come from, and my attitude about immigration. I cannot understand anyone, regardless of political affiliation, who takes the position, not one more immigrant. For God's sake, we are a nation of immigrants, and our strength is in immigration and diversity. The question is, should we have an orderly process or not? I think that's a legitimate question. The reason, of course, is to make sure that we have a process which people can respect, that cannot be overwhelmed, and at the same time understand that there are rules that have to be followed. When you take a look at the numbers of people who are showing up at our borders now, I have to go back to what Senator Graham said. They're mind-boggling. It is impossible to explain. I asked my staff to put together a list of the number of encounters of unaccompanied children by the Border Patrol since 2008. It's an incredible list, but the last 3 years are the most amazing revelations. In the year 2020, there were 19,657 unaccompanied children who were encountered at the border, 19,000. 2021, 140,000. 2022, 149,000. 2023, 131,000. The obvious question is, what changed and changed so dramatically during that period of time? It certainly wasn't the enactment of legislation by Congress. We've done nothing, virtually nothing, when it comes to policy changes in this country. But there is something going on, a force, an economic force, a demographic force, whatever it may be, that is pushing or pulling more and more people to our borders in numbers unprecedented. The obvious question is, should we do something about it? And can we do something that is balanced? Not the not one immigrant theory, and not the people who feel that the status quo is acceptable as it exists, but something in between that reflects our values and brings order to the border. Now, I think about these numbers in practical terms. I hope we all accept the premise of this hearing. Any child who shows up at our border deserves to be treated like a real human being and treated like a visitor to America and given protection and help in the areas when they're most vulnerable in their lives. I hope we all accept that premise. If you don't, I'm sorry. But I will tell you this, having accepted that premise, you have to ask whether the current system, designed long before we ran into these numbers, is adequate to the task. Where are these kids going? Where do these unaccompanied children go? What kind of families are they being sent to? How do they refer them? How do we follow up? How do we make sure that they're safe once they're there? The sheer numbers that I've given you here make it very difficult for me to understand how we can say we're going to keep up with this flow of people and maintain quality care for these kids. So I've given a long opening statement, which I hoped I would be able to avoid, but couldn't. But I'd like to start, if I could, with Mr. Salazar. You talked about the economic circumstances that create this. But those economic circumstances have been in the world for a long time. What has changed in the last 3 or 4 years?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. These push factors, as you mentioned, the political stability, the poverty, the crime, violence, food scarcity, lack of medical care, climate change, all of these are against the backdrop of some even bigger numbers in the world. There are approximately 108 million people that are being forcibly displaced globally. And of that number of 108 million, roughly 20 million are in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, this is a the definition of a challenge that no one country can face alone by itself. We have issues stemming from a long regime in Venezuela. We have issues stemming from the beginning of a regime in Nicaragua. We have issues in northern Central America also that are driving the families, the members of society there to make difficult choices for themselves and for their families and for their children to head north. We are attempting to tackle this diplomatically through regular engagement with these countries to try and address the issues at home. That is why Assistant Secretary Brian Nichols is actually in the region now. Yesterday he was in Guatemala, today he is in El Salvador.
I'm going to have to cut you off because I've run out of time.
I'm sorry, sir.
But I certainly give you time to respond on the record. But can someone address on the panel the fact that we offer services which we offered for many years, and now we have volumes and numbers of unaccompanied children which are breaking the system that make it very difficult for us to keep our promise? Would someone like to talk about the resources that are being dedicated to this, new resources to meet the challenge?
Thank you, Senator. As you mentioned in your opening, the importance of a trusted adult in these children's lives cannot be overstated. Children, we do our best. We have a thorough vetting process to release children to vetted sponsors, primarily close family members. But when and if those placements break down, having that trusted adult through post-release services or legal services. We have more children receiving those services than we've ever had, but we need to continue, and we need the support of Congress to do that. Because of unprecedented numbers in the refugee program, which both the refugee program and the unaccompanied children is one budget, we do have a request for $1.9 billion to be able to properly continue to expand and make sure that all children have these services.
Thanks, Ms. Marcos. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Count me in the camp that we need more legal immigration. We need less illegal immigration. Count me in the camp of making sure that children are not abused, and employers who abuse them, they should go to jail. How you say your name, Mr. Morant?
Morant, Senator.
Okay, well, I want to help you get the bad guys. You can't fix a problem until you understand the nature of it. Mr. Salazar, is it your belief that 312% increase in unaccompanied minors since 2020 is all about the economics of the world and not about Biden policy regarding illegal immigration?
So I think economics is just but one factor of the root causes that are driving.
You don't think the policies the Biden administration have implemented is a direct correlation to increase in illegal immigration at levels we've never seen before?
Sir, I think that the Biden administration has led the largest expansion of legal pathways.
Do you think you're doing it well? Do you think the Biden administration's got the right policy when it comes to illegal immigration?
With all humility, sir, I think we've got more that needs to be done.
No, I mean, the question is it working? Do you believe the policies being implemented by the Biden administration are working when it comes to deterring illegal immigration and controlling our borders?
Sir, I think more needs to be done, frankly.
Okay, let me tell you what that more is. Cut off the pull factors. If you're from Mexico, can we send you home as an unaccompanied minor? Or Canada? The law of the United States says if we get an unaccompanied minor from Mexico and Canada, we can send them back to their country. Is that correct, Mr. Salazar?
Sir, I'm not aware of what the law says.
Well, you need to be aware of the law because I think I've just exposed the problem here. Let me tell you, the law is that if you're from Canada and Mexico and you show up as an unaccompanied minor, we can literally send you home unless there's some evidence of trafficking. The reason it's gone up 312% is if you're from a non-contiguous nation other than Mexico or Canada, we have to keep you. Word is out all over the world that if you get here as an unaccompanied minor and you're not from Mexico and Canada, the United States, you'll be here forever. That's why there's 300 and something % increase. I'd like to change that law. I'd like to harmonize the law. No matter where you come from as an unaccompanied minor, we can send you back to the country of origin, because if we don't, we're going to have more human trafficking. We're going to have more sorrow for children, and we're eventually going to get some 17-year-old in this country that kills a bunch of us. So this is the root problem. You don't know what's going on. You can't fix it. Let me tell you, the border policies of President Biden are a disaster. We've had the highest number of legal crossings last month in the history of the country. It is now time to bring about change. We need to change our law to stem the tide of unaccompanied minors. It's a terrible situation. It will never change until the law changes. Asylum claims are not economic hardship based. The asylum system is broken. The parole system is broken. The incentives for unaccompanied minors need to change. We need to deter people from dropping their children off at our border because it's hazardous for them and there's a breaking point for the American people. So my advice, Mr. Chairman, is to let's work together to change the law, to slow down the illegal flow, work together down the road to fix a broken immigration system. But we have a war raging against our friends in Israel. The map of Europe is being rewritten by force of arms. Everybody in the policy world is screaming at us that the likelihood of a terrorist getting in to our country through a broken border is exceedingly high. The number of people on the terrorist watch list grows by the day. So I would like to make sure unaccompanied children are not exploited when they get here. That is a noble effort. But I would like to deter the world from dropping kids off at our border. It's not good for them, it's not good for us. And the policy changes that are going to be required have to be done before we can expect a different outcome. If you keep doing what we're doing and expect something different, you will be disappointed. I am now ready to make policy changes to stop what I consider the biggest national security threat to America, a broken border.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The child exploitation in our country that we've seen reported is stunning and shameful and truly extraordinary when you think that this is the United States of America. An 8th grader killed on a cleaning shift at a poultry plant in Mississippi, a 14-year-old hospitalized in Alabama after being overworked at a chicken operation, a 17-year-old in Ohio had his leg torn off at the knee while cleaning a meat processing facility. Another child lost his hand in a meat grinder in a Michigan operation. A 14-year-old maimed while working an overnight shift in our country. This should horrify everyone, but given what we know, it shouldn't surprise us. I'm glad we're discussing this. I'm grateful for this hearing, and there are a whole range of things we could be doing to better serve immigrant children. But I just want to say this clearly. Employers have a responsibility to abide by federal labor law and the moral standards of our nation. Within their companies, on plant floors, and their contracts, they should follow the rules of law and they should follow their own conscience. I sent letters to meatpacking companies last December to take immediate steps to put end to these child labor abuses at their facilities. And since then, I want to say some companies have stepped up and are working to eliminate these exploitative contractors and abusive models of employment that outsources the overnight cleaning of their facilities. They've moved these jobs back in-house and guaranteed better wages, benefits, safety, and security of a union job. But too many companies continue to sit on their hands, and the Department of Labor, in my opinion, has to step up and enforce the law. These companies are getting away without consequence to some of the most shameful and immoral practices that are going on in our nation. And for companies that refuse to implement changes, who see children and their safety as a cost-saving measure, at the very minimum, should not be the recipient of federal tax dollars. That's why I'm introducing today the Preventative Child Labor Exploitation Act with my colleague Josh Hawley Our bipartisan bill will require companies competing for contracts with federal agencies to disclose child labor and work safety infractions by the company itself, as well as by any of their contractors in the preceding 3 years, and require the Secretary of Labor to prepare a list of companies that are ineligible for federal contracts for that year based on serious, repeated, pervasive violations of child labor laws. We absolutely, all of us, in a bipartisan way, have an obligation to help these children, often in poverty, who've often fled dangerous situations at home to find themselves in our country being exploited and in dangerous situations in the United States. This is beneath the dignity of this nation and the values we proclaim. At the minimum, we need to restore accountability for those companies. And so I just want to say to Ms. Nanda, I'm grateful for your testimony. During June's hearing on this topic, I focused my questions on the consequences of our continued failure to have a Department of Labor that has the resources to do the investigations into these kind of more abject, morally bankrupt practices that are going on in our country. And so, Ms. Nanda, can you describe why child labor investigations are especially resource intensive for the Department of Labor, and what are ways in which the DOL has assisted corporations seeking to address child labor in their supply chains?
Thank you so much for that question, Senator Booker. So child labor investigations, as I said, have gone up 88% in the last year, so we're simply doing more of them. And I can't underscore enough how labor-intensive these investigations are. Before the investigations even start, there is a lot of work that goes into understanding what the investigators are going to encounter when they get into that plant or that facility. What are the type of workers they will encounter? What are the type of employers? How are we going to show or prove that those are minor children, et cetera? So there's a lot of what we call pre-investigative work. We have been routinely obtaining anticipatory warrants. So that involves doing a lot of work to make sure that we have cause to get a warrant and that we can properly execute it, sometimes working with marshals or law enforcement to make sure that we will be able to execute that warrant. Often this is taking place in the middle of the night. Our Packer sanitation case involved the third shift with the very young children cleaning very, very dangerous head split cutters and other dangerous equipment. After we go in, we are immediately potentially getting declarations and affidavits from the investigators who were with the children so that we can potentially get a temporary restraining order. Our Packer sanitation case involved going in at the same time to 7 separate facilities, all in the middle of the night. So huge resources of lawyers and investigative teams, in some cases needing to be flown into different places. This is Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, different places in the country to have that factor where we can go in and still have that surprise factor. And then after that, we are seeking temporary restraining orders. In PSSI, we were in within days getting that temporary restraining order. A nationwide, so leveraging a 7-facility investigation into a 700-facility nationwide injunction, thereafter working to get a permanent injunction, and then assess the civil monetary penalties. This takes an extraordinary amount of investigative time and an extraordinary amount of legal time and legal work. And I will just say, Senator, on your question about holding everyone in the supply chain accountable, we completely agree. We are using tools like the hot goods provision of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is a very powerful tool to stop the movement of goods that are made around child labor. That is a tool that we are using.
I'm going to cut you off just to be respectful of my colleagues. We've gone 2 minutes over. I just want to thank Senator Hawley, and especially as well as his staff, for working with us over the last months to come up with what I think is a morally urgent bill to create needed accountability to end these morally bankrupt, offensive practices that are going on systematically in our country. So thank you, Senator Hall.
Thanks, Senator Booker. Senator Cornyn.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this hearing. You said you'd do it, and you're doing it. I appreciate it very much. This is an urgent and serious issue. I think what we're seeing is what happens when the Biden administration is outsourcing its immigration policy to criminal cartels who are getting richer by the minute, smuggling people and drugs into the United States. And of course, the casualties associated with that, the grieving parents losing their children to fentanyl poisoning are well documented. Mr. Salazar, in your testimony, you talked about Central America and the so-called root causes strategy. It sounds to me like the administration is engaged in a nation-building process to try to address immigration and doing nothing at all about the pull factors which lay out the welcome mat for people all around the world. Let me just ask you, did you know that in 2022 that people from 174 different countries came to our border and were released into the interior of the United States, 174 countries? Did you know that?
Sorry, no, sir, I did not.
And did you know so far in 2023, people from 143 countries have come to our border and been released by the Biden administration into the interior of the United States? Did you know that number?
No, sir, I did not.
Well, I agree with Senator Graham. When you try to solve a problem, the first thing you need to do is understand what the problem is. And what has happened as a result of the expectation that if you make it to the border, that you're going to be able to make it into the interior of the United States and stay here for the rest of your natural life is a huge magnet. And who wouldn't want to come to the United States, where the standard of living and the prospects for your life are far better than anywhere else in the world? It's a natural magnet. But the Biden administration has created the distinct impression that you can stay. And of course, the cartels who control smuggling and control drugs continue to get rich. So what's not to love from their perspective? But the casualties associated with this are real. Let me just ask our witness from HHS and Health and Office of Refugee Relocation. My figures show that 300,000 unaccompanied children have been placed with sponsors during the Biden administration. Is that your understanding, roughly 300,000?
Thank you, Senator. That sounds accurate. I'd have to get back to you on exact figures.
And you've read as you indicated, it's the process, and these children haven't even necessarily claimed asylum, but under the current practice, you identify a sponsor, and then that child is placed with a sponsor, and I think there's a chart or priority list depending on whether there's a family relationship, but there doesn't actually have to be. Isn't it a fact that there's no mandatory FBI criminal background check system on those sponsors? There's no requirement that, and no practice by which you do that in every case, correct?
Thank you, Senator. Every sponsor goes through a sex offender registry check and a
I didn't
public
ask about that. I asked about an FBI criminal background check. There's no,
Certain sponsors have an FBI background check.
but not all of them.
That is correct.
Yeah. The New York Times, as you know, documented that in 85,000 cases, when a call was made 30 days after the child was placed with a sponsor, there was no answer. Are you familiar with that story?
Yes, I am.
And the truth is that the Biden administration doesn't know what has happened to those 85,000 children, or to the larger point, to the 300,000 children who've been placed with sponsors, because the administration does not deem that as their responsibility. Is that correct?
Senator, as I mentioned, while our custodial authority
I
ends,
ask you, is that correct? That
our care for the children does not. We are expanding post-release
Well,
services.
I'm asking about the 300,000, and so there is no follow-up. Can I just ask as a final question, the New York Times documented that Susan Rice, the domestic policy advisor for the Biden administration, and that Secretary Becerra, who's head of the Health and Human Services, both were made aware of these 85,000 attempts to contact sponsors with no avail, and did nothing in response. Do you know if in fact the President of the United States was informed about these facts?
Senator, I'd like to set the record straight that although a call was not picked up,
Do you know if the President of the United States was made aware of the report in the New York Times about 85,000 unanswered wellness checks 30 days after the child was placed with a sponsor? Did the President of the United States know that?
We are in regular communication. I can't speak to the specifics, but I want to reiterate the fact that a telephone was not picked up, a telephone call was not picked up, does not mean that that child did not have post-release services, did not have legal services.
But you don't know because you don't follow up after that. You
or
can't tell us whether the child's being sex trafficked into forced labor, whether they're going to school, whether they're getting health care. You can't tell us whether they're being neglected or otherwise abused. You can't tell us, and the fact of the matter is, if you cared to find out, then you could do something about it. But it's obvious to me that the Biden administration simply does not care. My time's up.
Senator Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for being here. Ms. Dunn-Marcos, I'd like to start with you. And I've got a lot of material to cover, so if possible, I'd like to have you confine your answers to yes or no, if possible. So let me summarize some of what I understand about this process, about the ORR process. Now, once you get a child, you start looking for a sponsor, or alternatively, a sponsor may come to you. And then you do some kind of a precursory background check to figure out what's going on, to see if they've got any convictions in the United States. You don't ask if the sponsor is here legally. You don't check in the sponsor's home country if the person is not originally from the United States, to see if they are wanted there for a crime or have been convicted there of a crime. You don't come with local law enforcement. You seldom, if ever, do any kind of a home visit. If they don't answer the phone after a month or so, then you consider your job done. Given that you cannot remove a child once you've placed her with a sponsor, wouldn't you agree that vetting on the front end should be increasingly more vigorous and not less? And shouldn't a home visit and conferring with local law enforcement be the bare minimum that is done rather than the entirety of what you do?
Thank you for those questions, Senator. I think that we have thorough vetting processes in place. We have child welfare experts throughout the country. We believe a child is best in a family, with a family in a community, not in a congregate care setting.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that. But given what you don't do, that's what I find alarming. I don't doubt that you do some things, but what you don't do is alarming. And that's why it shouldn't be surprising to us. This New York Times article that my colleague Senator Cornyn referred to, that indicating that HHS has lost contact altogether with more than 85,000 children. 85,000 children that this administration has negligently placed with all but unknown sponsors, and now ORR has no earthly idea where these children are. And when asked about this, you recently passed the buck entirely and said, aside from the 30 to 37-day follow-up call, you, quote, do not monitor or track the whereabouts of children after they're released from your care, close quote. So am I understanding this correctly, that they're not lost because you're not legally responsible to know where any of them are after you place them, yes or no?
Thank you, Senator. I want to clarify that ORR is not a law enforcement agency or an investigative agency.
I don't doubt that.
We-
I'm not accusing you of that. I'm saying you don't know where they are, and now you're disclaiming responsibility. And of the
Senator-
430,000 unaccompanied children, the vulnerable unaccompanied children who have crossed over our border in the last 34 months since President Biden took office, what percentage of those children's whereabouts can you tell me with any degree of certainty?
Senator, respectfully, I want to state again that it is not accurate to say we have lost, that we have lost them.
Okay,
There are
what
a
about my
number-
question? What percentage can you tell us where they are?
I don't have those figures directly in front of me, but what
Will you
I
get
can
those to
tell
us?
you, I will take that back to
Okay,
the team. But
let me tell you what's happening to them. Because clearly, you either don't know or you're not saying. They're being trafficked for sex. Doctors Without Borders has repeatedly told us that at a minimum, 30% of the young women and of the children who make this dangerous trek across our southern border, to it and then across it, are sexually abused on their journey. There are other entities that have come up with much higher estimates, some of them double that or more. Can you give us any idea how many of the 430,000 children who have entered our country under the Biden administration have been trafficked either en route or after they leave your care? Any idea at all? Any rough estimate at all? Any approximation of how many of them?
Senator, one is one too many. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but anytime we have a flag for a child in our care, we make a referral. Within 24 hours, we are referring to appropriate authorities, HSI, our Office for Trafficking in Persons. If we really want to change this narrative, we want to provide post-release services and legal services to every child. Thank you.
My time's expired, but look, the sheer volume of this, coupled with the estimates that I've never heard you refute, are that we're talking about probably hundreds of thousands of them who have been trafficked for sex and who have been sexually abused. This is wrong. It's wrong that we set up a system that encourages and then allows and then promotes and perpetuates this process that enriches drug cartels and does so at the expense of child sex trafficking, and it must end. Thank you.
Senator Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Morant, since President Biden's been president, how many non-American citizens have come into our country illegally or on the basis of a claim of asylum?
Thank you, Senator. HSI, as an investigative agency, is
Do you know the number?
no, Senator.
You're a senior member of Homeland Security, are you not?
That's correct.
Does anybody know the number? None of you know the number. Try 8 million. Now, of that 8 million, how many were children, Mr. Morant?
I don't have that number,
You
Senator.
don't know. Does anybody know? None of you know. Isn't that special? Let's assume half. Okay? 8 million is 4 Nebraskas, right? 4 new states. Let's assume, I don't think it's as high, half of them are children. How many of those 8 million people are still here? Do any of you know? Okay. How many of those 8 million are claiming asylum? You don't know? How many of them claim asylum and don't show up for their hearing? Nobody knows? How many of them claim asylum, don't show up for the hearing, and President Biden has deported them? You don't know? How many of them have claimed asylum, shown up for their asylum hearing, and been denied asylum and been deported? You don't know. How many of them were from Mexico? You don't know. How about 30%? That means 70% were not, right? Surely you know the answer to that. 30% minus 100% is 70%. Am I right? Okay, 30% came from Mexico. Why don't you implement a safe third country policy that says under our asylum rules, you have to seek asylum in the first safe country. So if you come, say, from Venezuela or Nicaragua or another Central American country, you have to seek asylum in the first safe country. Why don't you do that? And then that would eliminate 70% of the 8 million. That's 5.6 million. Why don't you do that, Mr. Morant?
Is that a question, sir?
Yes.
That's
All
beyond
I've been asking are questions.
That's beyond the purview of HSI.
Oh, okay. How about you, Mr. Salazar? You're a former advisor to the vice president. How come we don't do a safe third country agreement?
Sir, we're working with our partners in the region. 21 countries signed on to the Los Angeles Declaration.
Have you done a safe third country agreement? You've had, what have you been at it, 2 years?
What we are doing is working with them to expand legal pathways.
Why doesn't President Biden get up in the morning tomorrow and say, we're changing the asylum process and we're doing what most other countries do, safe third country policy. You have to seek asylum. We support asylum. We have to seek asylum in the first safe country. That would eliminate 5.6 million people, boom, done, coming into our country illegally, wouldn't it?
Sir, I just want to point out Washington.
Wouldn't it?
It would, sir, but there are activities underway.
Let me ask you this, because I'm going to run out of time. President Biden and all of you believe in open borders, don't you? Don't you? I mean, I ask really basic questions. I don't mean any disrespect. I appreciate you being here. And I know you all love our country as we all do. But I believe in straight answers. I like straight answers and breakfast food. And there are only two possibilities here. Either President Biden and his team believe in open borders, or the people that the president has put in charge of the immigration policy of this country are not qualified to manage a food truck. And nobody's that incompetent. You folks believe in open borders, don't you?
Sir, I think we believe in secure borders.
You believe in then you don't even know how, well, I'm going to take 30 more seconds. You don't even know how many people have come in illegally since President Biden has been president? You're a former senior advisor to the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Salazar. And you can't even give me a number?
No, sir.
That's like going to an oncologist and asking him, what's cancer? And he says, I don't know. Give me a break.
Senator Welch?
Thank you. I thank the witnesses. Just speaking to my friend Senator Kennedy, this question of border security is one that I'm very concerned about, and I know you are, obviously. But it's an astonishing situation where you have these children who are fleeing these incredible circumstances that motivates them to take this journey all the way up to this country. And not an easy, there's a lot of tragedy here, a lot of human tragedy, not caused, I don't think, by anybody here. I'm just going to ask Ms. Marcos, can you just describe the situations for some of these kids, where they come from, what their situation is, what's motivated them to go through the Darien Gap and walk thousands of miles, or come from El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, where a lot of these kids are coming from? Just tell us what your experience is with describing these kids and what their circumstances are.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I myself have not worked in the region, but I spent many years of my career working in and around refugee camps and with populations like the unaccompanied children who are fleeing a number of things: gang violence, extreme poverty, persecution. And we know that these are desperate situations. And what our team of professionals wants to make sure that we are doing is that when they are referred to our care by DHS or another federal entity, that they are safely taken care of, that they are in an environment that we can do full assessments. If they have a risk of trafficking, if they have been trafficked, then we make referrals to the appropriate law enforcement agencies.
And what's the process of for these kids if they're going to be sent back to their country of origin?
Senator, respectfully, I'm not probably the best person to speak to this, but certainly people fleeing horrific situations, sending them back is putting their life at risk.
Mr. Salazar, I mean, you've been, I appreciate that. A lot of what Senator Kennedy was asking you actually is something I think Congress has to do as opposed to you can unilaterally do. But can you describe what the situation is for some of these kids that show up and what has to happen?
Sir, I actually don't know what the process is to return these individuals back to their home countries.
Ms. Nanda, there's an immense amount, a big increase in child labor. And kids who are coming are very vulnerable to being exploited to work. Sometimes it's even sex trafficking. Do you have any observations or any suggestions on what to do to reduce child exploitation, both child labor and sex exploitation as well?
Thanks so much for that question, Senator Welch. So first, I will mention that with regards to the Department of Labor, and we are charged with enforcing our child labor laws. We have a supplemental request for $100 million, which would be $50 million for the Wage and Hour Division, which does the investigations, $50 million for my office, the solicitor's office, that does all of the legal work related to the investigation, as well as that enforcement work. Wage Hour has seen a 12% decrease in their staffing over the last several years. Over the last 10 years, the solicitor's office has lost about 100 attorneys, or about 17% of our staff, with essentially flat funding. So the first thing I would say is certainly funding would help. These investigations are incredibly resource intensive in terms of human trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking. All of our investigators are trained to identify human trafficking. We also have mandatory reporting within 24 hours. We are routinely training our folks. We are making sure that we are aligned as a task force and working to get as much information out to our interagency partners on that work as well.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. This is really pretty remarkable testimony coming from you all, listening to what you've had to say. Basically, we've got a broken system. You don't know how to fix it. Money's not going to solve this problem, Ms. Nanda. You don't know the numbers. You don't know the law to enforce the law. So what comes across is that we've got a Homeland Security team here that doesn't believe in securing the homeland because you don't care enough to go deep enough into the issue to be able to define the problem and be able to fix it. Now, Ms. Marcos, I'm going to come to you because I've written Secretary Becerra twice about these children that they just can't find. Now, first letter, he got Acting Assistant Secretary Jeff Hill to send a non-response to my office, and then I sent another letter, and I haven't heard anything from him. I have asked that he come to the committee and talk to us about what has happened with these 85,000 children, where they are, and why efforts are not being made to find them and to be certain that they are being cared for. But there's no response to that because there again, you all believe in open borders. Your goal is not to secure the country and the border. Your goal is to just let everybody come on in and to hell with this trying to find 85,000 kids. You didn't vet the sponsors right. You did not do an FBI background check. Imagine that. You loosen what is required of people, and then you want to come here and say, we need more money so we can do our job. All right, Ms. Director Marcos, Linda Brandmiller, do you know that name? And keep your mic on.
I'm aware of that name.
You're aware of that name. And Jaylyn Solong, you know that name?
Yes.
Okay. And you know that both of these women were whistleblowers. And both of these women were fired for being a whistleblower. Are you aware of that?
Senator,
Quickly, my time's running out. Fast, go.
I'm not aware of the specifics.
You're not aware of the specifics. Do you know who approved this retaliation against the whistleblowers? You do not know.
Senator, I cannot speak to the specifics.
You can't speak to the specifics. Okay, was the secretary notified about the urgent situation developing in the department and that these children were being released to potentially exploitative sponsors? Did anybody pay attention to that? Or did you care? Was it 9 to 5, draw a paycheck, go on? We don't care. We're not concerned about an open border. We're not concerned about protecting children. What is your job? You're the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And you're not going to follow up on where these children are and who has custody of these children. Why did you accept the responsibility to be in charge if you're not going to do your job and protect these children? You don't have an answer to that. You don't know why you accepted the responsibility.
Senator, I would be happy
This is why
to
we need the
speak about this,
secretary
but
to
you're
come.
not giving me an opportunity.
Oh, no, I gave you the, tell me, why did you take the job?
I took the job because I'm a humanitarian. I've spent my life
You're
in this
a
work.
humanitarian who
We
can't
have-
find 85,000 children and don't give a ripping flip about where they are or what is going on in their precious lives. Is that what you're telling me?
That is a mischaracterization of everything that we do. I have tried to explain, but I am not given the opportunity.
Take the time, 25 seconds.
Thank you.
go.
I appreciate that. When a child is released from our care, there are a number of ways that they can continue to receive services. We attempt the safety and well-being call for every child who's been released. There is no obligation for a child or a sponsor to answer the call, and there's reasons why they may not want to answer a call from the government.
Oh, for
Additionally,
heaven's sakes, they're
please,
being
may I-
paid to take these children,
They're
and
not-
there's no reason
they're
for
not-
them to
They're
answer
not
the
being
phone?
paid- They're not being paid to take these children. Sorry. May I
Yeah, they are.
finish, please?
Yeah, they are. Go
They
ahead.
also, post-release services, over 50% of our children, we are working hard to get post-release services for all children. We are over 50% right now. That is another way to have a trusted adult in these children's lives. Legal services is another way, and we are expanding. We are providing more legal services
my
than we
time
ever.
has expired, and your
you.
answers are incomplete. I've got 2 more questions I will submit for the record. Mr. Morant, I have one for you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. At this point, I want to make sure that Ms. Marcos or someone else on the panel has an opportunity to answer in complete sentences questions about the 85,000 that were mentioned in the New York Times piece. Would someone like to take that on for 60 seconds?
Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to provide full thoughts on that. There are a number of ways that we engage with children once they have been released from our care. One way is the safety and well-being call that is made 30 to 37 days after they've been released. There is no obligation for a child or sponsor to answer this call, and there are a number of reasons why they might not want to answer a call from government. We also have a number of other touch points, some of them lighter than others. We have the ORR National Call Center. That is a call center that is operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that takes calls from children, from sponsors, from anyone in the community that has a concern or a question about an unaccompanied child. So that call center is available. And then, as I mentioned, we are providing more legal and post-release services in the history of the program. We are very dedicated to continuing to expand that with the support of Congress, and we do feel that it will make a difference by making sure that every one of these children has that trusted adult outside of the sponsor-family relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Next senator up is history in the making. Her first appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee, succeeding Senator Dianne Feinstein. As I said at the outset, this was an issue, the fate of these children, near and dear to the heart of the late senator. And I know you come to this meeting today with the same feelings. So we welcome you, Senator Butler. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Chair Durbin. As noted, as a senator from a border state, a former labor organizer, and a mom to a 9-year-old, not only am I eager to continue the leadership of Senator Feinstein on this issue, I find it imperative that we have this conversation. I want to appreciate the chair for bringing us all together to do that important work. Contrary to what we may have heard, the struggle to protect migrant children is not new. We see it under both Democratic and Republican-controlled administrations. My hope today is that we can agree on the fact that no matter what party is in power, our job is to do our part to protect these migrant children. This means listening to experts, giving agencies the resources they need, and holding companies accountable for violating our labor laws. I look forward to working with my colleagues to find bipartisan solutions, and I appreciate all of you for your testimony as I have read all of your prepared remarks and look forward to a discussion. I would love to turn my attention, Ms. Marcos, to the topic that you were just speaking on, post-release services. As you know, legal representation is vital for children attempting to navigate our complicated immigration system. We've heard reports of children as young as 2 years old, being asked to represent themselves in our immigration courts because they are not provided with counsel by the government. Some of my colleagues may not believe that government should provide counsel to all immigrant children, even those who are barely old enough to speak. Can you talk about the impact that it makes on migrant children to have the types of legal services and supports?
There are children all ages in our care. We know that it's extremely important to help children successfully navigate the system, that they have legal representation. We also know that children are more likely to show up for their court hearing if they have legal representation. Most of the children screened while in ORR care actually would have a pathway, and we could move things if we had more legal service providers. And we are working and we are expanding. Every child in our care gets a Know Your Rights presentation, and they also get a legal screening while they are in our care. Once they're discharged, there is a referral. What we don't have yet is sufficient funding and resources to make sure that every child maintains legal representation once they're discharged from our care.
Thank you for that. Let me quickly turn to Mr. Morant. Mr. Morant, I understand that H.R. 2, House Republican Bill H.R. 2, would decimate an important form of immigration relief known as special immigrant juvenile status. Can you speak to the importance of having pathways like T visas and special immigrant visa status, juvenile status, to child trafficking survivors, and what we're likely to see if legislation like that were actually able to succeed?
Thank you for that question. The department takes a victim-centered approach, and we'd like to provide every tool possible to aid victims in their path to recovery. Your specific question pertains to another agency within the department, so I would need to take that back.
Thank you. Last question, I talked about the impact of this topic on my own state of California, with California consistently being one of the top 3 states receiving unaccompanied minors. In 2020, Governor Newsom created the first state-funded project aimed at providing post-release services to migrant children called Opportunities for Youth. The services provided through this project include case management, navigation, mentorship, wellness programs to support children, as well as services to their caregivers. Ms. Marcos, can you talk about what kind of services ORR offers to the 43% of children who receive post-relief support from the federal government? And do programs like the one in California actually help to support the federal government's efforts?
Thank you, Senator, for that question and the opportunity to talk further about what it means to have a trusted adult in a child's life and comprehensive services as these children are adjusting to a new community. Just the other day, I was speaking to someone who provides post-release services, and they talked about how that service has enabled to prevent family breakdowns or to prevent the child from leaving. And so to have those comprehensive case management services, similar to what we do with new arrivals through the refugee program, really makes a difference in these children being allowed to be children and attend school and flourish in their new community. And absolutely what California is doing is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield time.
Thank you, Senator Butler. Senator Grassley is next.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses. Under Biden's leadership, family unit housing centers were shut down. Illegal immigrants were electronically tracked instead of being detained. Children became tools for criminals to avoid detention. Congress has demanded answers, and we've been met with silence, delay, or worse yet, a flat-out refusal to take responsibility. And I want you to know that I have the same sort of outrage you heard from Kennedy and Blackburn. Now, this isn't just a situation that affects the federal government and a few states at the border. The failures that I've talked about at the federal level have created problems for us, even in Iowa, at the state and local level. Worse yet, federal government has failed these kids. So in August, I wrote to Iowa's law enforcement people, primarily the 99 county sheriffs. They told me that the cartels didn't just traffic humans and drugs at the border. The cartels have a presence in communities across the United States and are particularly active along the major highways in Iowa. We have the Sinaloa and the CJ&J cartels. Now in the counties of Greene, Story, Marshall, and Polk County, right at the heart where the I-35 meets I-80. Those two highways cut across the United States. This problem is not unique to Iowa. These cartels are active in many states across the country. So to Director Morant, what steps has Homeland Security investigations taken to combat cartels in the interior of our nation, and what tools would be helpful in rooting them out? Can you provide a detailed plan to Congress by the end of the year to accomplish this?
Thank you for that question. As to the first part of that, HSI deploys a very robust strategy to disrupt and dismantle all transnational criminal organizations. We also use a force multiplier of vetted units overseas to try and push the border out before these crimes enter our borders. So we have a very, very active criminal strategy that deals with criminal activity not only within the United States, but outside of the United States.
Can you provide, you're going to have a comprehensive plan by the end of November?
I would have to take that back, sir.
Okay. Well, also to you, the New York Times reported back in February that over at least the last 2 years, HHS could not reach more than 85,000 children it placed the sponsors. So do you, how many of the 85,000 missing children has Homeland Security investigations and its law enforcement partners been able to track down?
HSI responds to every instance of human trafficking that we're made aware of as soon as we're made aware of it.
But you don't have a number for us, the number that you've actually been able to track down?
For specific numbers, I'd have to take that back.
Well, can you get us an answer in writing?
I'll take that back, sir.
You mean you can't even tell me if you can get an answer in writing, the number of people that's been affected? And
the response will be in writing, Senator.
Last Friday, I received an HHS response to a letter that I sent back in December. The response mentions that the Office of Refugee Resettlement recognizes the importance of notifying local authorities when abuse and neglect of unaccompanied children is suspected or uncovered. Director Dunmarcos, how many times did ORR and its third parties notify state and local authorities with concerns about possible child abuse or neglect?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. There are numerous ways and at different time periods that a referral may be made to local law enforcement, HSI, or the Office of Trafficking in Persons. That can happen while they are in our care. It can happen after they've been released from our care. They can be reported by the child themselves, by the sponsor, by the post-release service provider. So there's a number of different times that these reports can be made. For specific numbers, I would want to be precise, so I will take that back.
Okay. You said you were a humanitarian, and all the people on the group witnesses would probably say the same thing, and I'm not going to argue with whether you're humanitarian or not, but I hope you realize that not enforcing the law at the border puts us in a position of a life or death situation. You have people on the terrorist watch list that can't get on an airplane to come into this country, but they come across the river and get into this country. 800, 900 people die in the desert, get lost in the desert and die. We have criminals coming here and creating murders. We have rape on women coming through Mexico. We have human trafficking. You have the fentanyl killing 112,000 people. You're dealing with a life or death situation by not the enforcing of the law. And the Constitution says that the laws should be faithfully executed, and they aren't being. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Marcos, can I just start with you? You testified a moment ago to Senator Butler that every child gets a Know Your Rights presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that before or after you release them to labor traffickers?
Senator, every child that comes into our care gets a Know Your Rights presentation as well as...
Have you read these New York Times reports, these stories, the series of stories the New York Times has done on the children who are in your care? Have you read them?
Yes, I have.
Have you read that children are scrubbing dishes, they are operating heavy machinery, they are delivering meals, they are harvesting coffee, they are working construction, they are working as housekeepers, they are working overnight shifts at plants where they are not paid, they are not going to school, they are not cared for, they are not giving meals, almost all of it illegally. Are you aware of that? That's a yes or no.
Yes.
Do the Know Your Rights presentation help them in those situations?
Senator, ORR...
That's a yes or no, I think. Do you really think that you're helping these children by releasing them to labor traffickers and, yes, sex traffickers? 85,000 children whom you have no contact with, and your answer is we gave them a presentation before we turned them over to these people who are exploiting them on a scale not seen in this country for 100 years, a century. A century. It's a disgrace in the United States of America. Let me ask you this. You did an audit, I noticed, where you gave yourself a clean bill of health. So just tell me this. Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Senator, we have a thorough vetting process.
Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Yes, we go through
No, you do not. You do not. Have you read the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations reports on your office? There was one in 2016. There was one in 2018. There was one in 2020. There was one in 2022. Spanning administrations, what they found is you do not require sponsors to document their relationship with the child. You release them anyway. What about background checks? Do you require background checks on all adults in the household?
In cases where the child is being released to their parents, we do not require background checks. But Senator, I would
Do you
really
require
like,
background checks on all adults in the household in any case?
Yes, in some cases we do.
What percentage of cases do you do background checks on the adults in the household?
I don't have that number in front of me.
Do you do home visits in all cases? You can actually see where these children are being released, whose care you're putting them in?
We do not do home visits in all cases. Senator, I'd really like the opportunity to talk about what we are doing.
I know what you're doing, and it's incredibly and totally inadequate. And we can read about it in the New York Times. Since you say you've read it, let's talk a little bit about that New York Times report, if we could. Here's a quote from the April 17th installment. Again and again, veteran government staffers and outside contractors told HHS, including reports that reached the Secretary, that children appeared to be at risk. Did you warn the Secretary that children were at risk?
Senator, I'm in regular contact with the Secretary.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
Safety and well-being of children is our top priority.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
I'm not going to get into the conversations I've had.
You're here and you're under oath, and this is an oversight hearing, and we need to know what you're doing because you're manifestly not doing your job. Did you warn him that children were at risk? Do you believe that children are at risk? Let's start with that.
Yes.
Okay. Did you warn the Secretary?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics of my conversation, but I would like the opportunity
Why
to
wouldn't
talk
you
about,
warn the Secretary that children were at
I
risk?
would like the opportunity to talk about what we
Let's
are
look at what the
doing.
Secretary said to you. The other one, James. Yeah, that one. At least 5 HHS staff members said they were pushed out after raising concerns about child safety. Mr. Becerra, that's the Secretary, told the ORR director, that's you, right, that if she could not increase the number of discharges, he would find someone who could. And then he went on to say that if Henry Ford had run his plants like this, he would never have become famous and rich This is not the way you do an assembly line. Get the kids out, run them through, get them out to those sponsors, those traffickers. Why didn't you resign when he said this? Do you think that this is morally acceptable?
Senator, I joined ORR in September of 2022. I believe that was reported prior to my arrival, but I cannot speak
This is from an article this year.
I can't speak to what the secretary.
Do you think that this is acceptable to run ORR like an assembly line and to release these children to traffickers?
I can assure you we do not run ORR like an assembly line. The safety and well-being of children is our top concern, and by
Plainly
statute,
not. Plainly, it is not your top concern because you have managed to lose 85,000 of them. And the Times knows where they are, or 2/3 of them, and they're with labor traffickers. It's unbelievable. Let me just ask you this. How many kids right now, of the 430,000 approximately, unaccompanied children have crossed the border under this administration? It's an astounding number. How many are you in regular contact with right now?
Senator, we have a number of different providers across the country who
But what's the
provide
number? What's the number? How many of you are you in? You said child welfare is your top concern. What's the number?
I don't have the specific numbers.
How can you not know? Why would you come to this hearing and not know?
Respectfully, if you would like us to provide comprehensive case management to children after they're released from our care, so we can report.
Respectfully, I would like you to do your job and not release children to human traffickers. Respectfully, that's what I would like. I'd like you not facilitate the largest child trafficking ring in American history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our panelists for joining us. Director Marcos, as you are aware, unaccompanied minors often end up in foster care for some time. I'm currently leading an investigation in partnership with Senator Blackburn into allegations of abuse and neglect of children in Georgia's foster care system, and more broadly into the human rights of children in foster care nationwide. What oversight does ORR conduct of foster care agencies and relevant state agencies to ensure that unaccompanied children are not subjected to abuse and neglect in foster care?
Thank you for that question, Senator. ORR in all states except Florida and Texas work with licensed facilities, and through our federal field specialists, through our post-release, through legal services, through child advocates, children who do not have a family member do receive additional services because they are more vulnerable and stay in care longer.
And what steps can you take to strengthen the protection of unaccompanied children who wind up in foster care, who, according to accounts we've heard in Georgia, are at particular risk for abuse and neglect in foster care systems?
Thank you for that question. I think I have to go back to the expansion of post-release services and legal services. Both of those services extended for all children will enable that there is a trusted adult that can make sure the best interest of the child remains front and center throughout that child's life.
Well, as you know, Ms. Marcos, these are among the most vulnerable human beings in the world. Unaccompanied minors, lacking guardians, often lacking language faculty in English, and I urge you to strengthen, accelerate, and expand your efforts to ensure that unaccompanied minors in foster care in Georgia and across the country are better protected and fully protected from abuse and neglect using all of the authorities at your disposal. Can you please provide the committee with an update on your efforts to ensure that unaccompanied children in immigration adjudication proceedings have access to legal counsel?
Thank you, Senator. We have more children receiving legal services today than the history of the program. We don't feel it's enough. We are actively expanding our services. I believe 20 new providers were just added. We're hoping to double that by the spring. We know how important it is to have a legal provider help the child navigate through our immigration system. We also know that legal provision having a legal service provider will increase the likelihood that children attend their hearings. So we are very much, with the support of Congress, expanding both legal services and our post-release services, both of which will make a difference.
It's difficult to imagine, Ms. Marcos, the confusion and fear and pain of a child having to navigate complex, sterile, sometimes hostile legal proceedings that impact their future in dramatic ways with no parent, no guardian, no lawyer. Will you please provide to the committee specific information and metrics so that we can understand what progress is being made to meet ORR's targets for the provision of legal counsel to children in immigration proceedings?
Thank you, Senator. I will absolutely take that back and also ask for continued support from Congress.
And you will provide those numbers to the committee?
I'll take that back to the team.
Will you provide those numbers to the committee? It's just a yes or no question.
May I ask for the specific numbers you're requesting?
Yes.
The number.
I would like for you to provide to the committee numbers that demonstrate the progress that ORR has made to provide more unaccompanied minors in immigration proceedings with legal counsel.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Do that.
As you know, unaccompanied children are particularly vulnerable to labor exploitation, and we've seen reports of unaccompanied children as young as 12 and 13 pressured into working grueling hours at dangerous facilities, slaughterhouses. What do you see as Congress's role, and what more can this body do to protect these children from labor exploitation? Yes, Ms. Marcos, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I think, as we've said before, this is a whole of society approach. We need everyone working on this. It's not one quick fix, or it would have been done. In terms of ORR, what we can do is the continued work with our colleagues at Department of Labor, the expansion of post-release, the expansion of legal services, which does require funding. And that's where Congress can help. But
what I'd like you to do is to provide technical advice to the committee, please, on how we can amend relevant statutes in order to empower ORR to protect these children. Will you do that, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Marcos.
I might say to my friend from Georgia that I commend to him a bill which I've introduced entitled Protecting Unaccompanied Children Act, providing legal representation for all unaccompanied children, among 5 or 6 other provisions. I hope you'll take a look at it. Senator Tillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. And Director Marcos, over the course of the Biden administration, is the estimate right, or approximately 430,000 unaccompanied minors who have been placed? Is that roughly accurate?
Roughly accurate.
Can you give me an idea of what standard operating procedure is? So after you've chosen, or after you've made the decision to place this child, what is standard operating procedure, say, over the course of the year following, in terms of content? I'm trying to get some sense of exactly what role you play after placement.
Thank you, Senator. And this is where we are going beyond what is required of us right now, but we know that it's not enough. Everyone on our team wants to
I understand. I'm not being critical. I really want to go back, and there was a comment made that I think is very, very important. I think you can apply the same logic to asylum proceedings when we find out about 80% are adjudicated as not having a valid basis for granting asylum. I think that it would seem logical, given the numbers that we're talking about over time, that probably about 80% of the unaccompanied children, someone made the comment they're escaping very dangerous settings, and many of them are. But many of them are trying to get to a country of opportunity. We should take that as a compliment, but in reality, it's a bit of an insult in terms of how they get here. The parents or family members are paying money to cartels. Cartels are making almost $1 billion a year in human trafficking. People are getting hurt, traumatized, and out here. Others are dying. So I think one thing we need to do, one of the reasons you can't really do what you want to do is you simply have too many. And that is not your problem to fix. That's a problem of the administration to fix, because when the Biden administration came in, we saw nearly a 4-fold increase in border crossings. The area that I'm most concerned with is in the gotaways. One of the concerns that I have with these 430,000 unaccompanied minors who have been placed is they're going in communities where, since President Biden's taken office, 1.5 million gotaways are going to. You know, why would anybody choose to try and evade apprehension at the border based on the way the United States is dealing with people who come across the border illegally today? Why would anybody do that unless they had nefarious reasons or some background that they didn't want to have be made known when they're apprehended and they're being vetted by Customs or Border Patrol? These are dangerous people going in these communities. I talk with sheriffs all the time. I agree with Senator Grassley that these gotaways, not all of them, some of them may just be dumb and not recognizing how easy it is just to present yourself at a border to Border Patrol agency, but many of them have to be here for malign purposes. Many of them go to the communities that they identify with and exploit these unaccompanied children and the community as a whole. So going back, what in your ideal, let's say that your problem, could you do that comprehensive case management if the volume you were dealing with was 20% of what you're dealing with today? Let's say current funding, current resources, stay steady. You have only 1 in 5 as many to deal with in a given day. What would that look like in terms of true, responsible, engaged case management for an unaccompanied minor that's been placed?
Senator, I would have to do some figuring, but yes, of course,
it would probably improve the situation.
Yes.
And so I guess the point here, I'm not going to flog you all for executing policies that have been decided by the White House. I'm holding President Biden responsible for many of the situations we have for child exploitation because he simply let the system get overwhelmed. Now, for people to say that Congress need to pass new laws, explain to me how we haven't repealed any laws, but in the year following Trump transitioning, and I had disagreement with Trump. I believe that we have to immigrate more people and have more pathways to citizenship, more guest worker program, more opportunities for people who really want the economic advantages of the United States to have an opportunity to do it. But this president has made it virtually impossible for us to talk about improving and funding the processes that you're going through because he simply multiplied the problem by almost a factor of 4 or 5. If, again, you can extend the assumption that if 80% of the people are ultimately adjudicated to not have a viable asylum claim, then probably 80% of these unaccompanied children are not here because they're escaping oppression or fear in the country that they came from, but because they want an economic opportunity. But that is what that is doing is making it more difficult or virtually impossible for you to provide the kind of care for those young people who truly need the support of the United States and need safe placement in the community and continuous tracking while they're minors. So Mr. Chair, I hope that we get back to a reasonable discussion about immigration reform and about paths to citizenships. But until this administration wakes up to the problems that they've created by rescinding policies that were working in the prior administration, all we're going to do is have these shouting matches. And the ones who lose, are the children who are being exploited. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis, and I do look forward to working with you on that project here in the Judiciary Committee, and I think between the chairman, Senator Durbin, and the ranking member, Senator Graham, both have very strong and long-lasting and sincere commitments to trying to do bipartisan immigration reform demonstrated by their actions. So I think we have a real prospect, and I hope that we're able to take advantage of it, and I thank you for your
that, Senator
comments.
Whitehouse. And Director Marcos, I also wanted to mention, I was going to ask you a series of questions about the influx facility in Greensboro. I think it's in cold status now. I want to talk about that and understand when it could potentially be activated. So those will be submitted for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're most welcome. Let me just ask Ms. Marcos and Ms. Nanda. I understand that HHS and DOL have been working together to find ways to address labor exploitation of unaccompanied children. Can you describe those efforts? How is it going? Where are you so far? And what can Congress do to facilitate your work?
I'm happy to start. Thanks so much, Senator Whitehouse. The task force that is being led by the Department of Labor has active engagement with a number of other federal agencies. That includes my colleagues from state, my colleagues from DHS, of course, HHS, but also the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, USDA, the Department of Justice. And we've taken many steps that I'd say overall are focused on cross-training of staff, doing outreach together, making sure that we're getting materials out and actually reaching vulnerable workers where they are, and also education, all aimed at improving the health and well-being of children and children that may be extremely vulnerable. In terms of some specific work that we've done with HHS in particular, we entered into a memorandum of understanding in March of this year that is really aimed at improving and deepening our long-standing relationship that we've had with HHS. This means that we are coordinating on information potentially about child labor investigations. We are assisting in identification, or we have HHS assisting us in the identification of supportive services for victims or children that we may encounter in our investigation. It means that we may be sharing trends in child labor that we are both respectively seeing that will help both of us in our work respectively. So a lot of relevant information is being shared, relationships are being deepened, and we continue to deepen our work both with HHS and other members of the task force.
Ms. Marcos, anything to add?
Thank you, Senator. As she mentioned, much stronger coordination, both at the leadership level, but also in the different team level with both the identification, but also services after an investigation concludes. I think just kind of two other things that we have done is we have also stood up an accountability team, and also the National Call Center makes calls back to any child who's calling with concerns, just to make sure that they had follow-up and receiving services.
What's an accountability center?
It's an accountability team, and it's really looking at ways that we can continue to strengthen our sponsor vetting, and if we know that there are bad...
internal and sponsor accountability.
Yes,
Got
yes,
it.
that's
Okay.
correct.
Terrific. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate the witnesses being here. The record of the hearing will remain open for a week. If anyone wishes to add any materials to the record of the hearing, or if there are questions for the record for any of our witnesses. I heard Senator Tillis ask a question for the record, and I hope, request, and urge that you respond promptly to his and any other requests for the record so that we can build a good, strong record in the hearing. If you don't respond, it makes us have to chase you, and we have better things to do. So please be diligent in responding, and with that, I'll adjourn the hearing.
Thank you all.